Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Investment Trends, where we discuss the latest news in the stock market and the economy. So, for this week, so far, July has been relatively quiet from an economic news and earnings report standpoint. However, the week of July 13th, we have now seen a lot of different reports that have come out as far as earnings reports, inflation data, some things that are some key indicators for how the stock market will be performing and what we should start to expect for the month of July and maybe even as we enter into the third quarter as a whole. So lots of news that came out this week. Once again, obviously joined by John McKay. And a couple of things we wanted to touch on so far. So far this week, we saw the market start to rise. And first and foremost, it was mainly due to the inflation data. So a couple reports that came out that seemed to shine some positive light on things.
Yeah, headline CPI was down 40 basis points month on month, which is good news. The caveat being that was largely driven by reduction in energy cost, which, as we see, the U.S.-Iranian ceasefire now expired. Something to keep an eye on moving forward. Also, on Tuesday, Fed Chair Warsh spoke to Congress for the first time. He very strongly reiterated a commitment to a 2% inflation target and that the Fed is going to be vigilant to aggressively target that. And, I don't know that is too dovish moving forward, but
Right.
it gives us a little bit of a picture as to what the Warsh regime might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And from what we've seen in the inflation report, it looks like in the month of June, gasoline prices came down pretty significantly. So it seemed like those are being factored into a lot of these readings and these reports. And I think for most people, it may not seem like it, but obviously, the numbers are what they're showing, and stocks reacted pretty positively to that news, like we saw on Tuesday. And then even early trading into Wednesday morning, we saw some of the semiconductor companies, some of the chip companies, a lot of the tech sectors start to rally again off of yet again on Wednesday, some more positive inflation data as well.
Yeah, and that also coincided with ASML out of the Netherlands had a great earnings print Wednesday.
Yep.
That and Taiwan Semi always report pretty early, and they're kind of the warning shot for what the quarter is going to look like for those AI-related trades. And like I said, ASML had a great earnings print. At the time of filming, we're still waiting on TSM, but expectations are that it should be another solid quarter there.
That brings us to our next discussion point, which is the earnings reports that have come out this week. So early on in the week, we heard from some of the major banks. So we had Wells Fargo, we had JPMorgan Chase, and we also had Goldman Sachs report earnings. And it seems to be, one that I always watch, and full disclosure, I'm a stockholder of JPMorgan. Always seem to pay attention to what Jamie Dimon has to say. Seems to be such a well-run bank, and that their earnings report once again was very solid for the quarter.
Yeah, something we've kind of grown accustomed to with Jamie Dimon, and in his comments, kind of tempered upside expectations, I think, to try to eliminate any irrational exuberance that we see at times in the market, but still generally optimistic looking forward on the broader market. Similarly, Goldman Sachs posted great earnings, and David Solomon was very, very bullish on AI moving forward, both within the bank and in the economy as a whole, reiterating his stance that we're early in this cycle and there's still a lot of upside to be had there.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things that jumped out during the JPMorgan call. He asked the question, somebody asked the question that is this as good as it gets? And Jamie said this is about as close to as good as it gets, and he's not sure how long that will last. So he did mention that these reports, net profits in the over 21 billion, things like that they were able to extract. Also, certain revenues from investment banking and equity trading were spurred on a lot by the SpaceX IPO, which helped their trading division. So there are some certain headwinds, actually tailwinds, that JPMorgan was able to take advantage of for this quarter. Alluding to kind of his comment, like this is about as close to as good as it gets, which is interesting, for someone of his stature to say that. He is obviously very bullish on AI and how his employees can use it, but also how companies all across the U.S. Can continue to use AI. So yeah, definitely something that was very interesting. Then on the flip side, we had IBM, who did not report earnings, but they gave a pre-earnings announcement, and that led to the worst single day in the history of IBM from a stock trading perspective. I think they gave up about 67 billion in market cap in one single day, due to the estimate that they are going to miss their expectations.
Yeah, and that really shines a light on it's both the great and terrible thing with the AI trade. It's been so profitable over the last few years. Investors really have zero tolerance for underperformance from these companies.
Yep.
Almost reminds you of Microsoft in recent quarters, where they've had really good prints, but their cloud-based revenue isn't growing at the rate that investors want, and we've seen them get crushed in the market for that. So there's still, like I said, I think a lot of upside, but that volatility is there. If there is any faltering on these earnings reports or on the guidance that the companies provide for future quarters, there is going to be a penalty in the open market.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So definitely something to keep an eye on, especially with how inflated some of these stocks seem to be. Like you said, one piece of bad news, one small piece of bad news, and it can really send that stock into a tailspin, like we saw from IBM on Tuesday. So again, definitely something to keep an eye on. We'll continue to monitor more and more of the earnings reports that are coming out this week. There's some major financial companies that will continue to report throughout the week. Also, in looking ahead to the July meeting, they are anticipating with these positive inflation readings that it's a little bit of a less likelihood that the Fed would increase interest rates. So the probabilities of that went down pretty drastically this week as well. So again, something to keep an eye on. The earnings reports, we'll start to monitor those on a daily and weekly basis and give you updates as those come out. But once again, thank you for joining us this week. If there's any certain stocks or sectors that we missed or that you're following, feel free to leave a comment below. The content of this video is intended for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing presented here constitutes investment advice, a securities recommendation, or solicitation to buy or sell any financial instrument. The views expressed are our own as of the date of this recording and are subject to change without notice. As financial professionals, we may hold or manage client accounts that hold positions in the securities and companies discussed in this video. Those positions can change at any time. All data and information referenced is sourced from publicly available materials believed to be reliable. However, accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed, and past performance is not indicative of future results. All investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. This content does not account for your individual investment objectives, financial circumstances, or risk tolerance. We encourage you to conduct your own due diligence and consult with a qualified financial, legal, or tax professional before making any investment decisions.